Welcome back to the Justin Prince Show. Today's episode is going to be with one of the coolest dudes you'll ever meet. This is a guy that trains literally the elite of the elite when it comes to athletes. And so he's the one they go to say, how do I go to an elite level? And I have to just, by the way of introduction, I have to just share with you the story of how he and I met. And we built a friendship over the years, but I just think it's indicative of who this dude is. So I took my family a number of years ago to Puerto Rico, and we're there, and my son Isaac and I, he's probably maybe 17 or so. We go to the gym on this resort place that we're staying at. And early morning, go to the gym, and there's this couple in there that's just killing the game. I mean, they're working out hard, like sweat drenching, like they're going like all these cool exercises. And I've always been into fitness and health, and I'm like looking at this dude, and I'm like, no, bro, this is a whole different level. There's levels to this game of fitness. This dude is just jacked. He's probably 6 foot. I don't know. I'll have to ask you, Trav, how tall you are, but let's call it 6'4", 6'5",
Yeah.
just jacked built, just diced up, looks freaking amazing. And I'm looking at this guy, I'm like, dang, and they're just going hard at this. So and I got my son there, so I'm like, inevitably, I'm like, what's up, man? Just being friendly. And he just happy, friendly, good guy, says what's up to my son. Anyway, we just kind of hit it off. And since that time, we've stayed friends, and I'm super excited for you guys to hear his story. This is a guy with an incredible story. It's a story that will inspire you. It's a story that's going to help you go to the next level in your life. And like I said, when you have multi-million-dollar athletes saying, hey, help me get to the next level, you want to learn from that guy. So Travis, man, fired up to have you on here, bro. Appreciate you making the effort.
I appreciate you having me. I appreciate it.
So what do you remember from that day at the gym, dude? That was a couple of years ago, but when we first got connected, tell me how you remember that experience.
It's funny, man, because me and you talk, like you said, we've kept that friendship. But I don't know if I've ever really told you this portion of it, and I've told Kyle this part of the story. And so one thing about always traveling with athletes, like you start to see people who aren't athletes doing certain things that athletes do. Like you said, we're all on a resort and things like that. So I remember when I went back to the hotel, I told him, I was like, "Yeah, I met this guy named Justin. We talked about it. We talked about you, and it really inspired me because I said, you got to think from my perspective. I've seen the entire world, but I've seen it with athletes, and you inspired me to let it be known that you don't have to be an athlete. You don't have to be those types of things that most people think you have to do in order to do it. So you inspired me to kind of like branch out and understand that I can do that for my family. I can create something to help people and see the world and enjoy and help, like I said, help people like you do. So I never told you that, but nah, that was like the turning point for me really seeing that, because yes, you see people, but then when I spoke to you, it's different from seeing people in the gym, like, okay, they're at this exotic place and you don't really talk to them. So you're like, okay, well, maybe he is, a little different. But then when I spoke to you, I'm like, yo, this dude can be like, he's doing something that I can do. You know what I'm saying? Why not? So I do appreciate that motivation. And I'm gonna say, I don't know if I ever even told you that.
No, brother, I appreciate that. So, one way that I look at life is there's 3 S's, and this is good. If you're a parent, think about this for your kids. If you're building businesses right now and you have sales teams or you have your employees, Kyle, you say this with the key people in your life. There's 3 S's. The first one is you want to see. So most people, no one sees them. We all want to be seen, heard, and understood. We want people to see us. Most people just go through their life, focus on themselves. They never see other people. And what I tell people is you don't want to just see them, just to see them. You want to see them not as they are, but as they could become. Like, in other words, the person they are born to be. So in other words, you see potential in people. Second thing is you say it to them. Like you say what's up and like speak some life into people. And then number 3 is you schedule time. And Travis, as I think of our journey, that's what we've done. Like I seriously, I saw you. I was like, man, what a freaking stud. And then I think I told you that. I was like, geez, bro, what's the deal? You're freaking just jacked. And then lastly, we've just scheduled time. We've gotten on the phone, we've scheduled time together, and we build a friendship and a relationship over the years. So right now you're in Philly and you are the head trainer for Kyle Lowry. So for those of you that maybe don't follow professional basketball as much, Kyle Lowry is a 6-time NBA All-Star. He's also an NBA champion, and you know how life is, man. Once you're a champion, you're always a champion. This is a dude that's a world champion. And you're Kyle's trainer. By the way, on that resort, Kyle and his family were there as well. So that's
Mhm.
why you were there when we were in Puerto Rico. Share with us, just kind of catch us up. How did you get into the professional athlete training business? How did this start for you?
Before I get that, when he watches this, he's gonna make sure he's Olympian too. He's Olympian, so
That's right.
he'll be disappointed. But no,
That's
seriously.
right.
Um, so as a former athlete, I played Division One at University of North Florida, and once I finished playing, I actually went overseas and played professionally in Finland and Slovakia. When I got there, I realized I'm not making life changing money. Slovakia, I'm in an area where it's just kind of like, yo, this is a difficult place to live in. You got to be real to live in Slovakia. So I was kind of, I got to the point. I was just like, you know what? I think it's time for me to make that transition and into what do I want to do and kind of, build who I am. Because when you're an athlete, and especially when you make it to the Division 1 level and the professional level, like that's your identity,
Yeah.
and it's kind of tough, man. And people don't understand how difficult it is because your whole life you've been you've been labeled as an athlete. So when you're making that transition and it's over, you're kind of like, who am I? Where do I go? Where do I even start? So I went back home and I actually started working at Home Depot. Started working at Home Depot and just trying to figure it out. Like, my mom's like, yo, you got to get a job. So I'm trying to figure it out. And I was like, you know what? My passion became training because I was actually extremely depressed during that time. Like, I didn't
Hmm.
know who I was. So I'm just like, well, you know what? I know I used to lift weights in college. This is something we did. So after work every day at Home Depot, I would go to the gym and I just lift weights. I lift. And I started to feel certainly about like, hey man, like when I walk through these doors, nothing really matters for that hour and a half, what I'm going through, or I'm not knowing who I am. So once you find that thing that you're passionate about, I think that's when you gotta really hit on it. And I realized I was passionate about helping people and I was passionate about training. And I went to grad school at Virginia Commonwealth University, took a couple internships, one at the University of Central Florida. And people find this kind of odd, but Kyle was my first paycheck ever from this industry. I went from an
Wow.
intern at Central Florida to working with Kyle.
Wow. And how many years have you been with him now?
So this is our first year was 2017. So we'll be going on.
So what
So
is
seven
that?
years.
7 years. And then how many years has he been in the league now? Because it's been
It's
quite a ways.
18.
I
This
was
is
going to say,
18.
so if you think of a professional athlete at year 11, let's call it approximately year 11.
Mhm.
First of all, if you make it as a professional athlete to year 11, particularly in his level where you're playing at a really, really high elite level, I mean, you are the 0.00000001% of people in the world, right? If you can get to that, I mean, just you're 0.001% of athletes, for crying out loud.
Mhm.
So for him to extend his career another 7 years and continue to play at a high level, uh, a lot of that goes to obviously it goes to that's a huge credit to who he is, right? That
Mhm.
he's finding specialists to really help him do it, but it also goes to a lot of your expertise, to
Mhm.
help him to recover, to know what workouts to do. And that's one of the things when we were in the gym together. You weren't just doing 3 sets of 10 on the bench. Like you had a very unique,
Mhm.
workouts you were doing. A lot of that. How did you gain some of these? Where were you learning some of these unique
Mhm.
ways to keep his body healthy? And I use
Mhm.
him specifically, but there's just people you train
Mhm.
generally. Where were you learning all this unique stuff that you do?
Mhm. I think just mentors and like I said, internships and using some of the stuff that I used in college. I grabbed some stuff that in Europe that I learned while I was over there because in Europe they're not really into like big heavy lifting. It's more of recovery and things like that. And rather on this side, it's more of like strength training and wanting to. So I just kind of like mixed both, took a couple from here and there, and and then put it all together into the way that I thought would work best for him, especially like you said, 11 years in, and it takes those guys a while to realize like this is actually what's keeping me going, and they don't realize that at a young age because they out of college, you eat McDonald's or whatever, you go play, you have 30. That's just the way you are when you're that much better than
Yes.
everybody else on
Yes.
that playing field. So then I think as he got to a certain point in his career, like I said, he was about 31. He was 30 when I first got one. He was like, I have to start doing things in my life, for my career to continue that I haven't been doing lately. So, yeah, man, just learning and studying and reading and a lot of hours in the library trying to put it all together for it to make sense for, like you said, a 6-time All-Star and NBA champion.
Yeah, so much of it also is that mental edge, that mental game. I remember you and I spoke a number of months ago, and people were coming to you basically saying, yo, man, I want to learn the way you think, in addition to just the physical, like the physical training. And you started coaching people. They wanted your insights as a coach, from your perspectives. And as you're talking to like business owners and business leaders, and as you're talking to people that are looking to be a peak performer, so someone listens to this podcast is that person, right? How are you applying those same principles of going, there's levels to the game. If you want to go to that next level, you can't just, to your point, you can't just eat McDonald's and show up and drop 30. Like at some point you got to start dialing the stuff in. One of the challenges I give people, as you're listening to this, I encourage you to think about this. First of all, would you be open to a challenge? Because if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. So take the day of today. Take the date today, depending on when you're listening to this. Cast out 1 year from today and give yourself this invitation, this challenge, to be in the very best shape you've ever been in your whole life 1 year from today. The very best shape. So if your lower back's kind of tight and your hams are kind of tight and you're just not where you want to be, or feeling your body fat's too high, or your strength's not where you want it, or you don't have the energy to play with the kids and run around, and at business you feel like you're slumping at 2 o'clock. Give yourself that challenge. So if someone were to take that challenge, what advice would you give them from the mental side to kind of say, you know what, let's freaking go. Let's go to the next level in your fitness. Let's go to the next level in your career, in your life, in your happiness. Like what are the things you're telling those types of people are saying, I'm ready to level up?
I obviously me and you speak on this stuff, all the time, and I enjoy it. I actually spoke on this today to somebody. I said, one thing that I'm extremely fortunate is that I made it to the top 1% in this training field, in this field. And what that does, and what that has done for me, it's put me indoors, it's put me on, in conversations with the top 1% of another industry, because we work hand in hand. So now I get to interact with the top 1% of NBA players every single day. And the main thing that it is that I take from it, that I encourage, the people I coach, is when you see elite, like this is elite that I see every single day. It's the things that they do prior, before, after, during the situations of whatever may be happening. They are extremely consistent at all times. I tell people all the time, we can have an 8-hour flight to Europe. When we land, I gotta find a gym. I gotta shoot. I gotta do that. Like when we wake up, yo, Trav, hey man, it's been a long flight. Where's the gym at? Let's lift. Like they keep that consistency, and it's like I think people think that there's something like there's some special power, or there's something like that people have. And I always tell them, I say, guys, I'm fortunate enough to be around these people, the Jimmy Butlers of the world, these guys in Miami that I was with, and it's just like, guys, when you feel like, you know what, I'm not seeing any progress, that's when they turn it up a notch. Like, I've been putting all this work. Why am I not seeing what I want to see on the court? Why is my body not doing what I want to do? That's when they take it up a notch, rather than, the average thinker saying, well, I'm putting all this work, it's not working, so let me throw it all away and just, scrap it. So I think the main thing that, I encourage people is, when you get involved with elite level people, it's the way they think, and the way they handle failure, if you want to say, or negativity. Like, it's fuel for them. It's not a knock in the face, where it's kind of like, this is the end of the world. This is like, oh, come on, let's go. Let's go. And I think that's what I try to encourage people. When one thing doesn't go right, like, that lets you know that, all right, that's one thing that I'm going to do differently. Great. You're even closer than you thought you were. You know what I'm saying? Because now you know a route that you shouldn't be taking. So professional athletes, man, they are the kings and the queens of these types of things, in terms of, being extremely consistent and disciplined throughout the journey.
Yeah, there's 3 things I pulled from what you just shared. One is it's the behind the scenes. So Stephen Covey talks about the private victories. So it's all the work that no one necessarily sees, but he says we're celebrated in public for what we do in private, all the private victories. I had Anthony Trucks on the podcast. I don't know if you haven't met Anthony, I need to get you guys connected. Anthony's played at Oregon as a linebacker, and then played in the NFL for a couple of years. I need to get you guys connected. He's a total powerhouse speaker now. He's just a total stud. You'll love Anthony. He calls it the dark work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're basically you show off in the light what you grinded through in the dark, all the dark work. But let me hit you guys with this idea of, let's say that you're a mom or you're a dad or you're a business owner. Like, maybe you're not in this case, you're not a professional athlete. So it may seem like that's distant from you. I've done a lot of work with John Maxwell. John Maxwell's Inc. magazine says he's the world's foremost authority on leadership, written 100 books. A guy asked him once, I said, John, how'd you write 100 books? He said, it's super simple. He said, I just do 5 things every day. He said, I read, think, file, ask questions, write. So we all know what reading is. We know what thinking is. Filing means he'll find quotes, find stats, find stories, and he'll file them away so we can use them later. He thinks and he asks questions and he writes. Read, think, file, ask questions, write. All right, question number 1. How many of us can read, think, file, ask questions, write? Well, any of us can do that. It's not like it's stuff that only he could do, right? Okay. And then the guy says, John, when you say you do that every day, what do you mean by every day? Guess what every day means in this case to John Maxwell? Every day means every day, my friends. He says, what do you do on Christmas? He said he reads, thinks, files, asks questions, writes. He said, what do you do on your birthday? He reads, thinks, asks questions, writes. He says, what do you do if you woke up and you don't feel well? He reads, thinks, files, asks questions, writes. The consistency compounds over time. So every day he reads, thinks, files, asks questions, writes. Done it for 50 years and wrote 100 books and became the foremost authority in leadership and wrote more leadership content than any human that's ever lived in the history of the world. Why? Because of the consistency of doing things that any one of us could do, but he did it more consistently than any of us. And that consistency, to your point, I just think it compounds over time. It's like you don't miss the workout. You don't miss the meal. You don't miss the stretching. You don't say, I'm tired, therefore we're not going to do it today. You do it anyway. That consistency, compounds over time. And that is kind of one of these, key takeaways, these key things that happen to where, over 18 years, obviously Kyle had massive talent, but I tell people, you want to build skill. I want to hear your thoughts on this, by the way. The way I teach it is you want to build skill above the talent. So in other words, talent's the floor, skill's the ceiling. So we all have baseline talent, right? Baseline talent in business, baseline talent in our life, baseline talent in our fitness, baseline, walk around body fat or, walk around baseline. But then you want to build new skills above that to where if you're going to stay in the league for 18 years and be a multiple time All-Star, be a world champion, be an Olympic gold medalist, the only way that happens is to build new skills that are above the talent. So give me your thoughts on, building competency and building skill sets and building new skill sets and new skill sets to level up.
And obviously, great question. And this is why I love to compare them. Like you said, it's sometimes difficult for people because they say, hey, well, they're professional athlete. I don't look at it like that. I look at it in terms of what it really is, and I'm going to utilize it in my life. So, for example, we're talking about athlete. We'll talk about Kyle in this situation. It's a 6-foot guard out of Philadelphia. It's not the most athletic. It's not the fastest. That's just not who he is. He's never been that person. But as he was younger, he had a little more of the athleticism. But as he ages, he has to change certain things to allow him to still be productive.
Yep.
And I think that's the thing, like you're saying, what goes with all of us, as we enhance and as we get older or as we, become in a different position, we have to be willing to make those adjustments, in order to maintain or even increase where we're trying to go. So that's extremely what I'm fortunate to see in terms of that, because like you said, there's a baseline. We all have the baseline. That is what it is, But to continuously build upon that is where I think that gold is. People can continuously and find different ways to build upon that. That's what I'm trying to do right now. Like I became a trainer. I became in the 1%. Great. I love to help people. So now I have to build on top of that.
Yes.
I have to try to do the things that I can build on top of that so I can help, allow people to do that the same thing in their life. I'm not a professional athlete. It's the same thing I try to teach to my clients all the time and talking about building on top of what you already have.
All right, I want to dive into that because check this out. I think a lot of us listening, we have our job, we have our career, maybe we have a business. And yes, we're passionate about it. And yes, we're good at it. And yes, we pour ourselves into it. But it's not the only thing we want to do with our life. Or maybe we're looking to level up and maximize our income earning potential. And we're looking to, to create scale. One of the things you and I were talking about, and you've done a great job with this, is like when you're a trainer, like for example, Kyle at some point, even though he's played for almost
Yeah.
20 years, at some point dude's going to retire, right?
Hmm.
And when Kyle gets traded, for example, your whole life gets
Hmm.
disrupted, right? From as far
Hmm.
as where you're living and so on. So one of the things that you've done is you've started creating additional coaching opportunities, and like you've taken the expertise that you have here, and you've created more scale to serve more people there.
Hmm.
And I want all of you to hear this because many of you have expertise right now. Like you've learned some stuff, but like service to many leads to greatness. So like, how do you take what you know and what you've done, and how do you serve more people? How do you add more value? How do you create more scale in your life to where you get to a point where, man, job changes, and instead of having to move across the country or whatever, like you've got, other businesses going or other hustles going that are sustaining yourself. So walk us through how you got past kind of the imposter syndrome of
Hmm.
like, man, who am I to, go do this, and got into that coaching world to start building your coaching business.
And you know who the first person I called, and I'm not even just saying this because we're on the podcast, but Justin was the first person I called because maybe because I had a friendship with him, so it made it easier. But honestly, I don't think that was it. I think it was more of just the way you presented it, and I'm big on, like you talk about, be the one. I'm big on that. Like, so I'm like, I have a situation, and what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And it's so funny how all of a sudden he gets traded, and yes, the location changes, another plane or two I got to get on, but nothing dropped, nothing dipped. If anything, everything expanded and became more because I prepared myself for it, not thinking of a trade, just of what I wanted. And like you said, I
Hmm.
wanted to help more people. I wanted to figure out a way to let people know that, like, you can either make an excuse. I can either say, oh, I can't do nothing, I'm always traveling with Kyle, or you can find a way, because there are
Love that.
ways. There are ways, and that's what I think. And like when I first met you, that's why I said, I was like, yo, there's actually ways, because I didn't think that way. I'm like, when people need stuff from me or want stuff from me, and I'm like, well, I can't because I'm doing this, or I'm over here. And it's just like, eventually one day I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, there's a phone, there's a computer, there's everything you need to be able to do whatever you want to do, but you have to be willing to start thinking that way and talking to people who are doing it. And I think a lot of times people don't get to see it. I spoke on this earlier, and you said something about this, about like the working out and feeling a certain way. And I actually have a question for you about that, because people who haven't seen that other side, how do we get them to understand? Like you said, hey, if you do this, you pick up the kids, you have a better life, you have this and that. So my thing is like trying to get people to understand that haven't seen the other side,
Hmm.
that you it makes no sense not to attempt to go see that side. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, look, I think for a lot of us, we have we look back in the rearview mirror and we say, because of my failures, because of my past, because of all the challenges I've been through, I am where I am because I am who I am. And I'm just going to say this way. And I tell people, you're not who you are who you're born to be. So in other words, you are your potential.
Hmm.
And so one of the things that you are always doing is casting vision. So check this out, Travis. The number one difference
Hmm.
between the animal species and the humans is that we can cast vision
Hmm.
and go create something that right now is only a vision. This is the
Hmm.
number one thing. So like a lion, I was in Africa this summer.
Hmm.
The guy says, if a lion were to charge you, and this is easier said than done, I get it, but if it says if a lion were to charge this guy's the South African dude, this guy he's awesome. He's been charged by lions, been charged by different animals. He goes, what do I do? What do I do? He says, you stand your ground. Why? Because they only work on reaction. It's all instinction. It's all
Hmm.
instincts. What's the instinct for a lion? Everything it charges does what? Freaking runs away.
Yeah.
The deer run away. The gazelle runs away. The impala runs away. Everything runs. When it runs, it instinctively charges it. It just chases
Hmm.
down and kills it. It's just what it does, right? So when something stands its ground, the lion's like, what the freak is this thing?
Yeah.
Like, what is happening? It throws its instincts off. It's all reaction. Most people live in a world of reaction to distraction versus a world of intentional creation, intentionally creating their future. They say to themselves, they cast out a vision. Where do I want to be in a month, 6 months, a year, 5 years? Like this idea of getting in the best shape of your life. What kind of physical fitness would I be in if I could cast it out and I could pencil it in? I'd have this amount of body fat. I'd have this, weight. I'd have, my lower back wouldn't hurt. And I would, in other words, my body, this is how I would feel. This is how my body would perform. Well, that's all vision. And then the thing about a human is you can create it first in essence, spiritually. In other words, in your mind, and then you can go create it physically and you can go make it happen. And so I try and tell people, create your future with your future, not your past. In other words, create your future with your future vision of yourself, not your past, not the one that you've been, the one that you were born to be. And you start chasing that thing down. You start chasing the one that you were born to be, the potential that you have versus who you are now.
Nah, it makes complete sense. Like I said, it's always trying to explain that, to people and just, making them understand. Like you said, the vision is, and when I say like, and I'm blessed, and like I said, I'll always say I'm blessed, I'm fortunate, but what I'm doing and what I'm building, it all it all started right here. You see it, you call somebody who's doing it, you talk to them, and then you start to see yourself like, oh, I can
Yeah.
do this. But I think that, like you said, you can't live in the past. You can't. I trust me. I used to hate talking in the camera. If you look at my old videos from 6, 8 months ago, it was never me. It was always. And we talked about this on the phone. You said at some point you have to be you have to be willing to, for it to be you and you speaking to the camera. It was just something that I didn't want to do. But and then as I started to vision myself of who I wanted to become, I wanted to inspire people, I want to motivate people. So what are you going to do it from behind the door? You can't, So when you start to see what your vision of more and more, you start to become your weaknesses or things that you don't want to do. Don't become as timid anymore because that's a part of it. That's what
Yes.
has to be done.
Okay. So check this out. Check this out. I think a lot of us, as we're listening, we're like, God, so good, it's so good. And then we think to ourselves, the old story is overrides. It overrides where we're at. So in other words, we're like, I know I could be successful. We feel it in our heart. And then we say stuff like, yeah, but the problem is you got to understand, dude. And then we go back to the old story. Share with us the old story. Share with us the story. Because I think when people hear your story, because it's easy, dude's 6'5", built like a freight train, diced up, world-class trainer, trains the most elite athletes in the world. And is now a high-performance coach. You hear that and you're like, okay, well, in essence, good for him. Listen, my friends, this dude has overcome the real stuff, the real grind. So walk us back through, let's just kind of go back into the childhood stuff and some of that journey that you've been on, because when we first spoke on the phone, we kind of got into it, just like the real stuff, the real history. And I was I told you, I was like, man, I was just like, yo, I'm proud of you, dude. I just respect you. And I got nothing but love because of who you are and what you've overcome. So walk us back through that. And as you guys go through this, not only do I want you to connect with him as a human, like the vulnerability connects us, but then also watch how far he had to come to keep rewriting and rewiring that story to hear the mindset he has now. And I hope it's encouraging for you to say, man, I'm going to rewire my story too. I'm going to start rewriting a new one so that you can step into that person that you were born to be. So walk us through, kind of that backstory as a kid.
So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I was born there, and I was raised by a single mother. Now, being raised by a single mother, my father was around, and as I was growing up. So my father went to prison when I was about 8 years old. He went to prison. But the crazy thing about him going to prison was it wasn't because of something he did recently. It was because of something he did before I was even born. All right, so my father went to jail for murder, technically manslaughter, and ended up doing a life sentence in Massachusetts for 15 years. The reason I rewind it when I really get into the story is because I built a relationship with my father from, when I was born till I was 7 years old. And you guys know, as a son, or, and you look up at your father, in your eyes, he can do anything. My dad used to drive, act like he's doing no hands, and he got his knees on the wheel. And I'm sitting there like, oh my God, like he can really, that's who my father
Of
was.
course, of course.
And then all of a sudden, like, at 8 years old, you just get slapped in the face with the craziest story. Like, my mom had to tell me, your father's going to prison, for a very long time. And like I said, so think about the guy she met and the father, my father. all this is prior before any of that, you know. So went to jail, eventually turned himself in for the manslaughter, and did a life sentence in Massachusetts. So we
Hmm.
moved to Atlanta, and I used to write my father back and forth, and eventually, I got to a point where I was just like, are these conversations even? Are they even useful? You're writing letters back and forth, and you're doing those things, and before I even moved, I remember going to the prison, my mom taking me, and I tell her to this day, I can't imagine driving my 8-year-old son 2 hours down the road to see his father through a glass. At
Hmm.
that point, I'm just happy to go. Like, oh, we're going to see him. Like, she knows that I'm not seeing this guy outside until another 15 years. And it doesn't conceptualize in my head at the time. So once we moved to Atlanta to start a new life, that as I got older, I'm 10, 11, becoming a teenager, I'm like, this dude's never coming home.
Hmm.
Like, I'm gonna have to figure this, how to be a man by myself. Like, and this is a single mom, trying to figure it out. So that was kind of like the root of everything, of just always trying to figure it out, and not trying to not using, that story as something that I ever wanted to, just hold me as a crutch. And I don't even really speak on it much. And I remember when we talked about it, like, yo, this is, you have to utilize it. But you gotta understand, from my side, it's always been something where I've put on the blindfold, because I didn't want it to be a crutch.
Yeah.
But as I got older, I started to realize, like, the way that I started to think was because I realized I have to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's no other option, And I had the ability to see my mother always figure it out. As you get older and you learn about money and you learn how much kids cost, you're like, yo, she got this done every single time.
Hmm. Hmm.
Whatever I needed when I wanted to play basketball. I remember coming home and being like, hey mom, hey, they said the registration fee's 400. She's just like, yo, you just try it out, and like, and I'm just going up like, hey, it's 400, like, figure it out, not realizing that. So she really installed in me, like, there's always a way. There's
Mm.
always a way to figure it out. So that was kind of the first portion. Now, the second kind of, like you talk about rewiring a brain, because I'm extremely, I love speaking on that. It was, how do I create more out of this? How do I make this something that, extremely special in terms of my life? Because my whole life I seen just, like, credit to my mom, but it was never an extravagant life. It was never that. It was, hey, the food's on the table, we take care of each other, the next day comes. And as I've gotten older, and like I went to college, and I was fortunate enough to play basketball, I started to see different things. But I knew, like, hey, every time I go home, I go back to this lifestyle. So how do I continue to, to grow from that and use that? So rewiring the brain, and was extremely huge to me, because I always had to figure out how to take a next step so I wouldn't feel that way or go back to, where I was.
Hmm. So is your dad out now?
He's out now. Yep, he's out
Is he,
now.
you were about 23 when he got out, approximately?
Yep, yep. So
And
when he got, what'd you say? I'm sorry.
what's the relationship now?
It's difficult. So the reason it's difficult is because I became a man,
Yeah.
and it's that we try, but it's sometimes it doesn't feel genuine, because I figured this out by myself.
Mm.
And mistakes happen, things happen in life, but it's just like, how do I force myself to have that feeling when it's like, yo, I figured this out, on my own. And you also struggle with the when you are successful in life, you have to deal with certain things, and other people, may need you now. And it's just kind of like, where were you in terms of when I needed you? And that's something I'm trying to get better at. I'm
Yeah,
trying to
I get it.
understand, like, hey man, this is a very short life. And that's one of the things that I struggle with right now, is just understanding, like, that happened in the past. How do I meet him where he's at?
Yep.
And especially where I'm at. So that's one thing that is definitely on my list of things I have to figure out.
Let me ask you this. How much did the pain of that, just whole experience, and when you're you're 13, your friends are like, "Yo, what did your dad come to your game or not?" And it makes you feel embarrassed and it hurts and it just brings up all the emotions. How much did that pain fuel you and drive you? And how did you not let it crush you? How did you not let the embarrassment or the pain or just the emotions of it? How did you not let that crush you? And did that fuel you? Was that part of the fuel for you to succeed?
I think it was, and as you say that, I think back all the times of like you see, you look outside, you see your friends, he's throwing the football with his dad, those
Mm,
types of things I've never had.
mm.
I never had, and it was just kind of like, yeah, people would ask like, "Hey, is your dad coming?" Like, yo, I don't have a dad, so to say. So I think those things definitely fuel me, and they give me a urge of not being scared to try anything or failure doesn't really cross my mind because I've been a 13, 12-year-old kid that dealt with certain things that a lot of people couldn't even fathom. So it's like if that's the bottom, if that's the worst, it makes it easier for me, and I use it as fuel because I'm like, I've seen that before, and it helps me, try different things and be able to expand my knowledge and my career because I just use it, like you said, as fuel. It makes you want to be successful. For my mom, it makes me want to be even more successful to be able to one day and just let her know, like, I didn't understand it right now, but now I understand exactly what you went through. So she's probably my biggest fuel to this day of just like trying to make sure I'm successful she can be proud of who I became.
So there was a story I listened to the other day. There's a father that has two twin boys. The father is strung out on drugs in and out of prison, and the first son is strung out on drugs and in and out of prison. And they asked the son in an interview, they said, "How did you end up here?" And he says, "Isn't it obvious?" He said, "Look at my father." The other son is a top executive for a Fortune 500 company, got a beautiful family, living his best life, just a good, peaceful life. And they interviewed him. They said, "How did you end up here?" And he says, "Isn't it obvious?" He said, "Look
Mm-hmm.
at my father."
Mm.
And we don't see the world as the world is. We see the world as we are. And the way that you chose to show up and still do, Travis, to this
Mm-hmm.
day, like the way you choose to show up and instead of being like a victim to all the circumstances, because you in essence you were a victim, and what I mean by that is like you this was not of your doing, this was
Mm-hmm.
not something that had nothing to do, it wasn't something you caused, something it just happened, it happened in your life, it was an event that happened in your life, but instead of being a victim to it, your response to it was, "I'm going to be a victor in my life." And that
Mm-hmm.
is such a powerful response. I don't know if you ever had that conscious thing of like, no, I'm not going to let this be the thing that defines me. I'm going to have my own story be the things that define
Mm-hmm.
me. But that's what you've done. And it's just so inspiring to people because we all have crap happen to us, really hard stuff. And some stuff is self-inflicted and some stuff is not. It just happened. It's the events of life. Was that ever conscious for you to say, you know what, I'm not going to let this define my life. I'm going to chart my own path. Or is that something that was just kind of wired in you deep inside?
I think that part was wired, but I think that something that you said that really stuck with me is it wasn't a fortunate thing, but I seen what left was. I already knew what that was. So as I'm growing up in high school, like I'm constantly in sports, and some kids don't know what left is because they haven't seen it. I already know what it is. I already know what's
Got it.
down that track. So I think that unconsciously I took that route of just like I'm gonna go this way because I know this is the way. I've seen that. So I think that's the biggest thing that I take from it. You said at the beginning, like I seen it. I lived it. I've seen my mom. I've seen her struggle. I've seen that. Why would I continue to put that on her? So I'm gonna do everything in my power to go the opposite way. So I don't want to say it helped me because obviously there were people hurt, people died in the situation, but in terms of me, in terms of like utilization of the fuel, it helped me because I've seen what that path is. I know what it is.
Oh, so good. So good. Uh, Listen, bro, it's funny. We've met once in person.
Mhm.
We've talked however many times on the phone. And like you're my guy. Like I'd do anything
Mhm.
for you. You know what I'm saying? Like
My
you're
man.
like if I'm one thing, it's loyal. And I just want you to know how much admiration and respect I have for you. To me, you play life at a really high level, and it's a level that's inspiring to me. I think you inspire a lot of other people. I really want to encourage you guys to make sure you follow Travis specifically on Instagram. So Travis X Wallace, Travis X Wallace. His fitness content's off the charts, but his life stuff, his these perspectives and how he overcame this and how he overcame that, and what he's coaching people to do to become a lead. And this is a really good dude. So Trav, man, I'm so grateful we had this time together. I appreciate you making the effort. And I'm excited to watch this 10 years from now, bro. 10 years from now to see who you are, what you're accomplishing, the role that you're playing in the world is going to be, you got some big things ahead of you, dude.
Oh, man, I appreciate you having me. I had a blast, man.
Love it, bro. All right, my friends, make sure you like and subscribe. Please leave us a review. If Travis's story resonated with you and affected you, make sure you share this as well. Share it with your kids, share it with your team. We're not victims to the events of our life. We're victors to our response to the events of our lives. And we get to choose this outcome. We get to go co-create in this outcome because we get to choose the response. And so you remind this to people like, you can overcome this stuff. And Travis, thanks for being a living witness, a living example, a living testimony of the truthfulness of that. So my friends, like and subscribe and leave us a review, and we will see you on the next episode.